my undergraduate work was in secondary education at Indiana State. I went from there to Kent State, got a master's in forensics in Kentucky, and got a PhD. And while there, I studied under Richard Quinney, and also had as an advisor Melvin DeFleur, who was from the University of Washington. And it's through him that I got the job at the University of Washington as an assistant professor. And when I arrived there, I was in a room next to, my office was right next to that of Robert Burgess, who was in the same boat I was in. He came from Washington University in St. Louis. Both of us were hired before we finished our PhD degree. So we had to finish our dissertations in order to go ahead and get our degree. But because our circumstances were so similar, we began talking to one another a lot about what we wanted to do and what would be important in the field. And I'll have to say that the larger context of our conversations was sociology at that time was really re-examining itself. Functional theory was being re-examined. The grand theory of Talcott Parsons was being re-examined. People were leaning more and more toward Robert Merton's middle range theory. And there was also some desire to develop fields like criminology and family and other subfields to bring them along. And so within that context of changing, and there was an atmosphere, everybody was questioning everything. And so since our circumstances were similar, we began talking, and Burgess, although his degrees in sociology, was really almost a strict operant conditioner. It's almost as if he got his degree from Skinner himself. He didn't, but it was almost that way. And so he kept saying, look, operant conditioning principles, the principles of behavioral psychology, will inform sociology if we just pay attention to them. We should try to bring them in. And I said, well, how would we do that? So that was my question. I don't know how you do that. And he said, well, look, you're a criminologist. Who's the most famous criminologist? Well, it was Edward Sullivan. He said, didn't he have a theory? I said, yes. Was it called learning theory? I said, yes, it is. He said, well, that Skinner calls his a learning theory. So there should be some way to put those two things together. And so we began working on it. We began discussing colleagues. A number of them were very, very skeptical of what we were doing. A couple of them said, you're crazy. You can't get it done. There's such a wide difference between Skinnerian behaviorism and the symbolic interactionism in differential association theory. You can't put the two together. Well, he said, oh, yes, we can. So we did. We kept working on it. And our goal was to take Sutherland, retain what was unique and good about that, and add into it the behavioral principles. And at that time, we did not include imitation as a separate process. We follow Skinner's notion that, well, imitation is simply a special case of differential reinforcement. Now, later on, I modified that and changed that. I brought imitation as a separate process in. But that time, we didn't have it. And so we kept working on it. And next thing you know, we had it all modified. One of the criticisms that we got from our colleagues was, well, operant conditioning is tautological. So Burgess and I worked on that problem too. And I think we kind of solved it. We published an article in Psychological Record in which we were able to modify and solve that tautology problem in operant conditioning. So I felt we came up with a fairly thorough restatement. Seemed like a lot of people accepted it. And then we just went from there. Burgess and I worked on about 3 other articles together, and he began to lose interest in doing anything further with the theory. He began moving into more family studies and family processes, and I continued with this. Now, I did other things too. I don't know if you want to hear all this or not, but at that time, I was one of my chief interests was sociology of law, and so my dissertation was sociology of law, and my first publications were that. So, but I still like this idea of theory development. the thing that changed in theory at that time, or one of the things that changed, is the idea earlier was, well, if you have a theory, let's hear it, and somebody will state it, then leave it up to somebody else to find out if it's true or not. Don't Somebody else needs to test it. But uh, the idea that I had, and I really got it from Travis Hershey, who was there on the faculty with us as well, is you take your theory, you operationalize it, and you test it, and then see what happens. And so I thought that was the best way to go. So that's the direction I went, and